All right, hello ladies and gentlemen. It's been a minute. Been a little busy with work. I think we just completed almost 2 weeks without a day off, so God's good. And we have a small issue with the auxiliary tank that I installed maybe 6-7 months ago. It's been a minute, but I left the valve open overnight and the fuel set there in the hose. Never given me an issue before when I was on the road because the fuel was constantly moving. But I think whenever it's set like that overnight and then throughout the workday when the truck was parked, I think that the fuel had a chance to eat through a little bit of the hose, because that hose isn't supposed to be pressurized for too long. The hose is only meant to get the fuel from the filler tube down into the tank, and that's pretty much it. It's not like a pressurized fuel line hose. But whenever I installed my auxiliary tank, I used the kit. It came with extra clamps, so all I did was kept the original clamps that I had, and then I added 2 clamps on each portion that I added. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a second. But the only thing that I didn't add an extra clamp to was the portion that's leaking right now. So I think that was my issue. I'm going to tighten it, and then I'm going to add a secondary clamp. The ones that I got are 33 millimeters and all the way up to 57.2 millimeters. Just picked them up at O'Reilly's. It's like $5, and they have these little keys, so you don't have to remove, use any tools, anything like that, and they come off. So I'm going to go down there and look. I'll show you what I'm talking about, and then we'll fix it real quick, and then I'll just give you a review on how the auxiliary tank has been for me. The one that I use is an RDS auxiliary tank. Alright, so the issue, you see the little bit of drips right there, and then if you look at the fuel tank, the bottom's a little bit soaked. Nothing too bad. This is just residual from it. That's actually water. It's never done this to me before. Came out of the top of the tank and not actually underneath my truck. So let's see here. So that right there is what I'm talking about. Let me turn on the light. There we go. So yeah, so I added, whenever you add an aux tank, you run it through your bed. I added 2 clamps on the left side of the T, 2 clamps on the right side of the T, and then 1 clamp right there because it just drizzles in. As you see, there's the other 2 clamps right there for the main portion. And I added 2 clamps to that because I knew that's where most of the fuel would be going downstream from where it drips in whenever I open up the valve. So none of that's leaking. All the Teflon's held up pretty good. All that's just residual dirt. So I'm going to add on the secondary clamp, and then I'm going to tighten that one with the key that it gave me. There wasn't much to show. There we go. Squeezed it around. You can see I put some more tension on it. And yeah, that should be good. I'm going to get a screwdriver and secure that secondary one a little bit tighter. Alright, so as you see, I tighten it down, and those removable clamps are pretty cool. You can just put them on there, you take the little top off, and then I tighten down the other clamp. So now there's 2 clamps there, 2 clamps here. This one usually doesn't have any pressure because I usually don't fill this one anymore. I'm almost to the point where I want to remove it because whenever I replace the bed, I'm just going to use the aux tank anyway. Let the old girl warm up. It got hot out here in Texas. So. But back to fuel tank. So the RDS 93 gallon fuel tank has served me pretty well. It can be used as a transfer tank or an auxiliary tank, either or. They make the little screw types for both. The one that I have locks on the top, so it's specifically to be an auxiliary tank. Now they make other ones that don't have a top on them, and those you can just put the pump. They have, I'll probably put a picture right here somewhere, but they make those so that you can just have the pump sticking out the top. And I was this close to getting it until I realized that you don't need any type of pump to shoot your fuel into your truck while you're driving down the road. Now I have done a straight 17, 18 hour drive, and the gravity feed was more than enough to keep up with the fuel needs that I had. Now, if you're towing, you could be eating up a little bit more fuel, but as long as your actual fuel tank has at least half a tank and you're idling down the highway, or not idling, but you're going maybe 1,000, 1,200 RPM down the highway, for the most part, the gravity feed is going to do you just fine. You can add a pump and then add a relay and do all that type of stuff if you want to really just force it down and then have an electronic valve to close it off. But for me, just leaving it open was more than enough. Now they have a lot of options where half of the tank is a tank and then the other half is a full toolbox. They have some where it's just like an L shape, and I'll list them all out right here. They have some where it's mostly toolbox, and then a little sliver in the back is an auxiliary tank. And then the one that I have, most of it is fuel tank, and then the rest is a toolbox that sits on top of it. So it does take up quite a bit of your bed space, but I have a long bed, so for me it hasn't really been an issue. And for me, I like the fact that it doesn't stick up. It sits nice and level, which helps a lot whenever you're towing like a fifth wheel or a gooseneck and you have to jackknife, for example. And you can lock it. It's pretty robust. It keeps all of your tools dry, and you can add secondary locks on there if you really want to. The only caveat for me whenever installing this is that there's only 3 mounting places for the hardware to fix the toolbox into the bed. There's one in the front and 2 on the sides. Now I think the person that had it before me, they screwed it onto pieces of wood and then secured the wood to their bed. I think that was just to create some space. But what I did, I got some, they include some tape, and on the taller ridges of the toolbox, you put this tape down, and on top of the tape, there's like a cushion. So that cushion still leaves it to where water can run in and out of there without there being like a huge collection or like causing too much issue with like rain or anything else you might spill back there. So I rinse it out pretty often, and it all drains out just fine, just how it would with your regular bed. But I didn't like the fact that there was only 3 points of contact between the toolbox and the bed. And for how much weight that thing holds whenever you're accelerating and braking and going over bumps, my suspension helps out a lot because I have a full optioned out Carli kit. You can see my other videos down below, and it helps a lot with how much everything bumps around back there. It controls a lot of the shock and absorption of everything, but I'm still riding on factory leaf springs, so it still does bump around just a tad bit. I wish they would have included maybe 5 to 6 mounting points, because all it is doing is securing to your bed. It doesn't secure to your frame the way like a fifth wheel hitch would. So in that regard, if you're doing really hard off-roading, like you're going up mountainsides and coming down hills and like really pushing the truck, you're going to want some type of secondary securement system to bolt it down to your truck. So for me, it's still only bolted in the bed, but for the most part, it's my truck is a daily driver and a tow rig. I don't really go jumping unless the tank is empty. Then I'll do a little bit of spirited driving on back roads. But I added I have a strap going to it, and it just goes around the top and fastens it towards the front corner of the bed. I haven't had any issues with it sliding around. So the little bolts that they include, that was the other thing about it. They're only maybe like, I don't know, they're like 3/8 of an inch. So they're really small. They're not like super thick bolts. And I'm not saying they need to be, because the clamping force on them, they include a little spring, so it just keeps tension, and it gives the toolbox room to move around just a hair if it needs to, which is why I lean towards using a strap instead of something like a chain. Now for some of the other pros, your fuel range, okay, so you can have a short bed, you can have a long bed, you can have a mega cab bed, which is just a short bed anyway. The fuel range for standard 4th gen in most of the 2018 and older trucks. Mine's a 2012. You have 35 gallons, and then from there you only get heavier as you modify your truck. You know, you add wheels and tires, you add a suspension, you add off-road bumpers, or even just ranch hand replacements. You add, then you add a toolbox. You know, all of these things weigh your truck down, and that's before you even add your family and your passengers. You know, getting the extra fuel mileage. I think, like I said, I went about 17 hours straight. I think I took one break in the middle. I think I maintained 77 miles an hour. That was about my. That was about how fast I went. I wasn't pushing the truck very much. Now my truck rides on 35s, 295, 65, 20s. So it's a little bit taller than a 35. I aired them down to just what I needed with all the cargo that I had, and then the family and everything else in it, plus the fuel. And I think I was grossing right around 9,500 pounds, something like that. For a single wheel, it's pretty heavy without a trailer. So, but as the trip went on, obviously the fuel goes down, so my fuel economy slightly increased. I'm not going to say 2 or 3 miles per gallon increase, but it increased by the end by maybe half a gallon per mile. And that's just because with my truck, I don't mash on the throttle, and I didn't keep it topped out at 85 miles an hour or 90 miles an hour the whole trip, unless I needed to just pass some traffic. Having that versatility of actually not having to stop once you're fully topped off is a huge benefit to having a auxiliary tank like this. Now, if you want to procure one of these tanks yourself, they sell the install kit, and I'll probably put another picture right here, and I think I'll link a Amazon link down below. All the stuff on my truck, I put links down there if y'all want to do something similar that you see on the channel. I get a small kickback from those. I appreciate it. It'll help grow the channel. I'm not sponsored by anybody, so I'm just trying to keep the channel going as much as I can, try to share some information. Anyway, you can pick them up at Tractor Supply, Amazon, whatever works best for you. And the kit includes everything you need to tap into your factory fuel neck. So whenever you're installing it, you saw that you're going to have to cut a centerpiece out, and I think it measured out to be, for me, right around, hold on. Yeah, it measured out to me to be right around, I think I cut off about 8 to 9 inches off of my filler neck, and then it replaces that missing piece with a couple of hoses, and then you put your clamps on there. The little tape that you put underneath the toolbox, so there's a separation between the metal if you don't have bed liner. Like you say, you just have a bare metal bed. You want that separation so there's no chance of you bumping down the road and there's a spark between metal. So same thing applies on semi-trucks. There's always a rubber liner from the clamps that hold the fuel tank onto the truck. If you look under your truck or your car, you actually have the same thing securing your fuel tank to your vehicle. So just something to know. And you can buy that from there, and then to actually get a tank, you can either buy a brand new one, like I said, from Tractor Supply or Home Depot. A lot of places sell them nowadays. Or you can, like what I did, there's a lot of capacity to this thing, so it's a little bit more on the expensive side if you buy it brand new. I think it'll run you about $1,300 to $1,400 now with the price of materials. I installed mine, like I said, 7-8 months ago, but I got it used for $300. Now, to almost triple or quadruple your fuel economy, to me, it's already paid for itself just in time alone. Now, if you spend to the upper end of that, you get a brand new one. You're going to have to make sure that you wash it out. Make sure that there's no contaminants before you plug it into your fuel system. And even though mine was used before and it was just sitting there, I still ran a couple of gallons of diesel through there and then some diesel clean, and I shook it around and dumped it out. And I still, you know, did my due diligence to make sure that it wasn't going to contaminate my fuel system going into my fuel tank. So just be careful whenever you do that part. But everything else is pretty straightforward. I mean, you basically set it in there. For me, I used a couple of blocks behind the bed, or behind the tank, to separate it from the bed so that my lid could still open up. And they're not screwed in there. They're just there to kind of maintain the space and the gap. And I don't really see another reason why they wouldn't be like a good idea to do that. Now, obviously, you don't have to run blocks, but whenever you hit the brakes really hard, if you don't have something to hold that pressure, then the little bolts that they provide you could shear off, which is why, for me, that was my biggest critique on the install kit. But I left those there. They're not doing anything. They're not in the way. And it leaves a little bit of a gap if I want to put anything back there, you know, out of the way. But I left those there. And then other than that, the hardest part is just running those bolts down through your bed. And you drill them out, you put them in there, and you set a preload because there's a spring in that little kit. I'll probably put another picture here. And then it's secured to your bed. And then the only other thing you have to worry about is running the actual line, like you saw, down to the T-fitting. That T-fitting, you want to turn it until it is snug, but you don't want to over-tighten it. Just make sure it's facing the right direction that you need. And you could put it higher up, you could put it a little bit lower, but that's where I found was the best, so that the pressure from the gravity-fed fuel would push it down, and it wouldn't be at too much of a flat spot to not go into the fuel tank. So after you install it, you need to put a little hole in your bed to run the fuel line through. And just like your fuel tank, just like the little stripping that you put underneath the toolbox, you know, fuel tank, or just like a semi-truck, you want to make sure that you put some type of rubber lining around the hose so that the hose doesn't bounce up and down and cut over time. Because once you cut a hole into your bed, it tends to be pretty sharp because it's just bare metal that you're exposing. So what I would do is, for you, coat it. I coated it, I let it dry, and then I basically got an extra piece of rubber that I had from another project, and I cut it down to size and then put it in there in such a way that it's not going to fall out, kind of like a rubber grommet, or a what do you call it, like a bushing. I installed it much like a bushing, and then I put the hose through it, and now it's good. So I'll show you a picture of that here in just a second. I'll walk over there and show you what it looks like after we're done talking. Now, the biggest con to having a auxiliary tank, I would definitely be your bed space. We kind of touched on it earlier in the video, but if you have a really short bed, the size of tank that I have is probably not what you're going to go with. And I would say that if you do want to increase your fuel capacity without taking up hardly any bed space, it's much more expensive to do, but getting a full replacement fuel tank is probably what you're going to end up doing. The biggest con to replacing your actual fuel tank, which I can still do if I ever want to down the road, the price. Here, so SMB and Titan are the two biggest companies that make them. Now, if you have a 3 to 12, a brand new Titan fuel tank replacement, 60 gallons, so that's all you're getting. But it goes underneath your bed. 60 gallons is running you about $1,500. Now, after shipping and all things like that, I think it'll probably end up being like $1,700 plus the install. So it's a little bit harder to install than something like this. They have a smaller one, 55 gallon. It's also about $1,700. Now, that's from Titan. SMB, they claim that the cost is, let me see right here. They claim it's $1,350 US. So I think they might have a lot in stock, and they're just trying to, I think they're on sale right now. Oh, I'm sorry, never mind. It's back ordered. So something like this, I mean, it goes in your factory spot. And what it does is it expands on the extra space that you have down there. If you have a long bed, you have an option to get a 60-gallon fuel tank instead of the factory 35-gallon. Now it adds capacity. You know, you can fill it up. I've heard some horror stories about them leaking, and not being able to use the entire extra capacity that's added on there. I'm sure that's not all of them, but you're paying a little bit more, but also you're not losing any of your bed space. So if you have like a mega cab or a short bed, that might be an option for you, but just keep in mind you're not going to gain nearly the capacity that you would with an auxiliary fuel tank. And you're going to be paying probably twice the cost, because a regular aux tank or a transfer tank is going to run 30 to 40% less, and to install it is going to be much simpler than dropping your fuel tank after having to empty it out, things like that. So with an aux tank, you just need to plumb it in. With this, you have to drop it, move your fuel pump over, and then you put it back in there, and then there's still a process in which you break it down. I don't personally have any experience with that. I was going to lean that direction, but whenever you can buy a used auxiliary fuel tank for $300, $400, $500, I've even seen some of these 93 ones go for $600 used. With the price comparison and the difference, it adds more utility to the truck for me. I just opted to do this instead. But everybody's story is different, so that's just my 2 cents. But I'll end it off here. Like I said, I'll do a walk around of what it looks like, and you'll kind of see some of the things that I'm talking about. And then, yeah, we'll just pretty much call the video there. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And have a blessed day. Stay safe and enjoy the weather, because I think we're in for a stormy weekend here in Texas. All right, so I'm going to do the walk around real quick. There's the valve. There's one bolt right there. I put some wood blocks behind it to give it space so that I can still lift it up whenever I need to. Now I have an 8-foot bed, so I still have, let me see, let me get the measuring tape. So with this installed, from there back, you have about 65 inches of usable bed space, because obviously when the tailgate's up, you lose that. Now I'll go again under here. So there's one of the bolts that you use. You have a little spring that you preset, so it gives it room to bounce around and not rip out of the bed. There's a T-fitting. And then if you see, because of the bouncing around that it's done already, it's already angled a little bit, but it just literally goes through the bed, and the hose, you just make a hole. And then, like I said, I made my own little gasket there. So I tried to leave about ½ an inch of space so you can still use the lid the way you need to. So one honorable mention that I will say could be a good option for you if you don't feel the need to have a spare tire, or say you have like 37s and you have a Ram truck. They have Titan does. Titan has a auxiliary fuel tank that replaces your spare tire location for a fuel tank, and it holds an extra 30 gallons, so that could potentially double your fuel range. But the caveat, like I was mentioning earlier, right now it is $1,700 plus tax and shipping, so probably almost $2,000 by the time it's all said and done to your house. So just an honorable mention, and I'll end it here. Y'all have a good one.